Welcome to our very special pre-Christmas episode. We are re-releasing our second ever story we covered, The Thing About Pam.
One of our faves.
One of our favorites. One we refer to often. And
very often.
So I hope you get your Arby's, get your DVD of The Road, and you settle in. But before we get to the episode, the original episode, we have a brand new segment. We're going to add a time machine because we never did the time machine when we did Pam.
Time machine. Yep.
So please enjoy this brand new segment of our time machine and then the original preview of The Thing About Pam on So Much Crime,
So Little Time.
All right, Dee. We are going to go back to when the crime at the center of The Thing About Pam happened. That was December 27th, 2011. Let's hop in the time machine.
Do you know what's funny about this is we've covered this time period, so we're going to have to make sure that we are careful not to choose the same things we chose the time before. Right, Jeff, I have flat read of a song. Okay, this is a song that reached number 2 in Ireland. I think it reached number 5 maybe in the UK, although I'm surprised. I'd say in latter years it would have reached higher because it's kind of had a bit of a resurgence. It is not a cover.
Not a cover.
Da, da, da. So exciting. I went to find how it did in the US. Unsurprisingly, Ireland has if you Google top hits Ireland in a year, you get like one list. But in America, you get like 50. I have US Billboard Hot 100, US Adult Alternative Songs Billboard, US Adult Contemporary Billboard, US Adult Pop Airplay Billboard, US Alternative Airplay Billboard, and it goes on and on. You make things so freaking difficult.
We're a large and diverse country that contains multitudes. What can I say?
Yeah, but surely there's one. Like, is the Billboard Hot 100 like the one to look at? Like, if there's one, there has to be like the top songs of the US. You can't. There's one top. Like, there's one winner. You know?
I mean, this is where I can talk about when I was a kid and everyone all listened to the same pop music, and then the music industry fractured, and now no one listens to the same thing. But do you really want that? I could give that as a presentation if you want, but I don't think anyone's here for that.
Well, I'm definitely not here for it, but I just wanted to give out about the fact that this country is always making things complicated.
Okay. So wait, this is a song that was popular in Ireland, the top of the charts in 2011, and was on some of the U.S. charts, none of the U.S. charts.
No, it was on some of them. It was it went to number 15 in the Billboard Hot 100. It went to number 1 in the Adult Alternative Songs. It also went to 1 in the Alternative Airplay, whatever the frick that means. And then a dance club song, because presumably there was a dance club remix. It went to number 7. Okay. And hot rock and alternative songs, it went to number 3. It's also on other ones, but I'm not going to list them.
You're saying this as though it's going to be helpful for me to guess it, and it's really not.
Is it not?
No.
All right, okay. All right. Well, you asked. I just provided the information.
Theoretically, it is, but based on my track record of getting these questions, these right, it's not going to help me.
All right. Well, good luck. So, it's a British band, by the way. So that's going to help you.
Okay.
When she was just a girl, she expected the world, but it flew away from her reach, so she ran away in her sleep and dreamed of, that's the name of the song 3 times, every time she closed her eyes. When she was just a girl, I don't know why I try and hide these from you because you're not going to get it anyway.
You could sing it.
She expected the world. I mean, that doesn't say much though because my singing isn't great. She expected the world, but it flew away from her reach and the bullets catch in her teeth.
Okay.
Life goes on. It gets so heavy. The wheel breaks the butterfly. Every tear a waterfall. In the night, the stormy night, she closed her eyes. In the night, the stormy night, away she'd fly and dream of.
One of these days, you're actually going to have the musicians come on the show and perform it.
I should do that actually. Instead of a flat read, I should play you the intro.
I'm just trying to think of British bands that were reasonably popular in 2011 that I might have heard of. Would I've heard of this
Still very
band?
popular. I went to see them 2 years ago in Levi Stadium. You wouldn't know, I don't think, that I went to see them, but
Is it Coldplay?
yeah,
Really? Wait,
yeah.
really? I got one.
Well, I mean, you needed a lot of help. You still don't know the song.
The fact that it's a
Should
band that
dream of. The word is in one of the titles of the podcasts we have reviewed in the last 4 months. She'd dream of. Mm, 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 mm.
I don't know many Coldplay songs.
Why?
I mean, I know like three. I know like Clocks, and I know the
The other one.
what's the other one?
I know 3 songs. I know Clocks and the other one.
Gwyneth Paltrow, Apple.
Indeed.
That's all I got.
Paradise. Paradise. It's a great song.
I don't know if I've ever heard that song.
You-
If
You
it's
definitely have.
it sounds like a Coldplay song, I can imagine it in my head now. There's Chris Martin being kind of Chris Martin-y.
Are you going to slag him? Because he's like here to sing the song for you.
Is he here? Chris Martin is here.
He's here. He's behind my jacket.
One of my favorite all-time artists.
Anyway, there you go.
All right, that was pretty good. All right. So for the record, didn't know the song name, but got the band. That's half a point.
After I told you that they were in Levi Stadium 2 years ago and I went to see them.
You're not going to believe me, but Coldplay was in my head the whole time.
No, I don't believe you at
If
all.
you had said
That's
it,
the biggest load of bullshit I've ever heard.
when you said British band, that was the only band I thought of. If you had said it wasn't Coldplay, I didn't have a second choice. I can't think of another British band that was popular in 2011.
Go on, your turn.
All right. I looked at the top tech news of 2011. Spotify, our lovely podcast host,
I love you, Spotify.
first debuted in the United States in 2011. And
Wow.
at the time, was as a free user, you had a cap on how many total hours per month you could listen to music. And also, you had a cap on how many times you could listen to the same song. They
That's
wouldn't
really
they
sad.
wouldn't let you listen to the same song over and over again. So, any idea what the cap was on hours per month or times per song?
Okay. Hours per month. I'm going to go with 30 hours per month.
It's not even close.
Is it much higher?
No, it's much lower.
What?
It's 10.
10 hours per month?
That's like a day. You could listen to Spotify for like a day. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's tiny. And what was the other one? How many times you can listen to the same song?
The same song, yeah.
10.
5.
What?
Yeah.
In a day? If I'm in a certain mood, I need Taylor Swift's All Too Well playing on repeat. A 10-minute version could get me through 10 hours.
It's in a month. So 5 times a month you could listen to the same song.
You're joking.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Stagger that Taylor
Oh my
Swift
God.
song. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I wouldn't be able to do that. I have to listen to it about 3 times in a row anytime I'm in the mood to listen to it.
All right. My last one is in 2011, IBM's Watson computer went on Jeopardy a couple times. Do you remember this?
No.
Okay. I remember this. So this was Watson, the basically like AI supercomputer, went against Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter, who at the time were 2 of the best all-time active Jeopardy players. It did pretty well. It did really well. But in Final Jeopardy, so it was a multi-round, like a multi-day match. And they ran as each one was a normal Jeopardy game with regular Jeopardy, double Jeopardy, and a Final Jeopardy. Final Jeopardy on the first day.
How did the computer buzz in?
So I remember watching this at the time. And if you want to make this
random question.
if you want to make this a 3-hour episode, we can go. It's a very long Wikipedia page that I would encourage people to check out or just like, I'm sure there's probably like a documentary on this. It was fascinating at the time. There was all kinds of stuff behind, like how did it actually interact? How did it, like, whatever. We're not going to go into that here. But I'm just going to ask you one question, the Final Jeopardy question from that day. So the Final Jeopardy question.
You're going to ask me it?
Because Ken Jennings and Brad Rutter got it correct and Watson did not. And there are specific reasons why it did not. It still won the game. But okay, the clue was, so the category was, this is going to be a weak area for you, I know, U.S. cities.
Oh, fuck's sake.
The clue, its largest airport was named for a World War II hero. Its second largest for a World War II battle.
I don't know why I'm thinking. New York.
Do you know the names of the airports in New York?
JFK.
Yeah. Who was in World War II?
Newark.
That's technically in New
And
Jersey.
then-
The other New York one is LaGuardia,
Yeah.
who was the mayor of New York, not a name of a battle. But
I mean, Jeff, I don't even know more cities.
it's a good guess in that it is a city that has two airports, and one of them was related in a way to World War
Oh,
II.
what about Chicago? Someone's O'Hare. Is it right?
That's right. That's right. O'Hare is the hero.
International?
And
okay.
The other one is Midway, Battle of Midway.
Oh, wow. Okay. Didn't know that.
There you go.
Interesting.
So Watson didn't know it for a variety of reasons. It actually guessed a Canadian city. And they said that part of the problem was the category was U.S. cities, but it didn't say in the clue U.S. cities. Also, the clue had a semicolon. It was, largest airport named for a World War II hero, semicolon. It's second largest for a World War II battle, and it didn't know how to process the semicolon.
I mean, this feels like since 2011, AI hasn't changed much. This is what I was just dealing with this today. Not taking in the U.S. cities as a... Yeah.
All right. So this crime takes place in Troy, Missouri.
Okay.
So I went to TripAdvisor and looked at what are the top 2 restaurants, according to TripAdvisor, in Troy, Missouri. And the number 1 is a place called Big Sticky's. It's a barbecue place. Great reviews. I read through quite a few reviews. Really made me want to go there and get some good barbecue. But I looked for bad reviews, and there aren't a lot. But one of them was from someone named Travel Queen, who had this one sentence. The ordering process is not easy because the counter was built for a giant and hard to talk over to the person taking the order who hardly spoke.
A teenager, I presume. Oh my God, that is so funny. Built for a giant.
Yeah, there's a lot in that. So that was one. The number 2 restaurant is a place called, I think it's pronounced Taormina's. It's a Sicilian family restaurant. And someone named Blue Man 66.
Did you choose it because you just felt a calling to your Italian relatives?
Well, wait till you hear this part of this review. So Blue Man 66 said, and I quote, "Wow, wow, wow. Talk about a surprise. This place was great. The French onion soup was out of this world. The service was also very good." And so as a person who is 1/4 Sicilian, I was
French onion soup?
The French onion soup is the one thing you call out from the Sicilian restaurant? To be fair, I went and looked at pictures from the restaurant, and just from the pictures, French onion soup actually looks really good. Anyway, that's Taormina's Sicilian family restaurant in Troy, Missouri, if you're ever there.
That was very funny. I appreciated that. Two days after Christmas 2011, Russ Faria comes home to find his wife Betsy dead. Betsy's brutal murder would set off a chain of events that would leave another person dead and expose a diabolical scheme. On this episode of So Much Crime, So Little Time, we're previewing the Dateline podcast, The Thing About Pam.
Welcome to So Much Crime, So Little Time. I'm Jeff.
I'm Dee.
And in this episode, we're going to introduce you to the Dateline podcast, The Thing About Pam. This is one of our preview episodes, so if you haven't listened to The Thing About Pam yet, you're in the right place. We're not going to do any spoilers. We're just going to focus on the first episode. In our next episode, we're going to discuss the whole series, but here we're just going to talk about what happens in the first episode and let you know if the show is really worth checking out. So a little later, we're going to tackle a true crime question of the show. We have a really good one lined up for today. And I guess we should jump in. All right, are we ready to go to Missouri?
Let's do it.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about what this show is about first.
Okay, so The Thing About Pam was originally a series of stories on NBC's Dateline show. Then it was a Dateline podcast, and that's what we're going to talk about here. They later made it into a 6-part TV show with Renee Zellweger. The podcast came out in 2019. It's 6 episodes long, plus a short follow-up from 2021.
All right, so what about the story? So we're in 2011. It starts on December 27th. We're in Troy, Missouri, which is a small rural town about an hour from St. Louis. Russ Faria comes home, and he finds his wife, Betsy, dead. In this first episode, we're going to hear his 911 call. We also hear recordings of his interrogation by the police, where we hear Russ's alibi. Then later on, we hear a little bit of Pam's interrogation. So Pam, from the title, The Thing About Pam, Pam was Betsy's friend and possibly the last one to see her alive. By the end of the first episode, we have really just a lot of questions about Betsy's death, and we keep getting told that it's going to get strange. All right. So, D, initial thoughts. And if your first thing isn't about Keith Morrison, the narrator, I don't know where else we start.
So, oh, that's so funny that you say it, because my first thing written down is the voice. So when I was playing it, I was like, I had a few different things going through my mind. One of them was, am I listening to some sort of children's story? I don't know, I had The Night Before Christmas in my head. I don't know if that's something you're familiar with. I don't know if I've ever even heard that read, but that's what came into my head straight away. And then the second thing that came into my head was the film, the Christmas movie again, The Holiday, where in it, Cameron Diaz is a film director, and as she's going through the horrors in her life, she usually does adverts for films, and so she's always thinking about taglines that will catch people's attention. And so she might have an episode where she's really upset, and the next thing it'll be Cameron Diaz, blah, 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 blah. And this voice comes on to voice her advert. And that's the other thing that I kept thinking of here. I just found it fascinating. And no bad blood to Keith Morrison. His voice is lovely and it's really soothing, but it's not necessarily the voice I would have put with such a gruesome story. It just took me a while to marry the two together.
In that Cameron Diaz movie, The Holiday, how many brutal murders are there?
Oh, 0. It's all about love and Christmas. There's no brutal murders at all. This is why I was trying to marry the two together. It was an interesting, I don't know, I'm going to use a word now to sound smart, and I don't know if it's right. Dichotomy? I don't know, maybe that's the incorrect word to use here, but
that works.
It just was bizarre. Tell me, you brought it up, so I'd love to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, his voice is so powerful. It's he has this presenter, movie trailer voice, a guy who clearly has been doing voiceover work or anchoring a news desk forever, which is what he is. I mean, I had to go look him up. I don't know, did you look him up, or do you know much about him?
Of course I looked him up, and the piece that I was oh my God, he was Matthew Perry. He was Matthew Perry's stepfather. So
yeah.
he married Matthew Perry's mother. Matthew Perry, if anyone hasn't heard of Matthew Perry, Friends, that's what I grew up on. So I find that really interesting as well. But that's just a side tidbit, nothing to do with the thing about Pam.
But he also as of when this podcast came out, which was 2019, he had been a Dateline host for a quarter century.
Yeah.
Before that, so he comes from Canada, and he had been doing news, reporting type work, TV work forever, really. I mean, I think it's at this point, probably about 50 or more years. He's been around a long, long time. And I think but you said this earlier, I think it stands out there's a dichotomy between the super polished, super slick, I don't know, uber pro voice and this grisly, weird story that was sort of just a disconnect, but also mesmerizing.
Oh, I loved it. Like
Yeah,
after
I
I
just
got
want to
over
listen to him talk.
yeah, and after I got over that initial, like, what is happening? Am I listening to a child's story about a dead person? This is weird. Um, I loved it. Like, I actually thought it, yeah, it's good. But like, I don't know, you could really get into like the zone just listening to the tones of his voice and forget to listen to the words. Like, he's such a broadcasting voice.
That actually happened to me a couple times. I had to go back and re-listen to parts because I realized I was just sort of in a trance listening
Yeah,
to his voice.
yeah. Interesting. Um, So yeah, so that was like literally the first thing on my my initial thoughts list. I really want to know what I'm kind of slightly baffled by in a way, is the name of the podcast. Because the first episode, like Pam is obviously spoken about, but like she's not like a main character.
Right.
I shouldn't say character because these are
She's
real
a real
people.
person. Yeah.
She's not one of the main people involved in the story. Like it's Betsy and it's Ross. And obviously Pam is mentioned, but like we know from, in the last episode we discussed about titles. Like, do you listen to, or do you look at the titles of the episodes when you're like listening to a true crime podcast? Do you look at them ahead of time? Do you look at spoilers for books or movies or whatever? For this, you can't but see the title because it's the name of the full podcast. So straight away, you know something is weird. So what I found myself doing in episode 1 was like listening out to Pam and like ears tweaking at like, what weird stuff has she done? And like nearly like kind of like taking whatever they said about Pam and really like my mind going wild trying to figure out the pieces ahead of time because I know she's obviously such a main player in the story. So I just found that interesting and I'd love to hear like how you felt about the name of it.
Yeah, I think that I'm on the same page with you. I think I love the title of the thing about Pam, and then the fact that Pam, we don't even hear her until late in the first episode, I think, and we don't really hear her very much. I think it sets up this mystery, and I think I was maybe making fun of a little bit about how we keep hearing about how strange it's going to be, but it is kind of really just like setting the table of like, we're going to get to her and it's going to be weird. And like, it's coming, but it doesn't really happen in this first episode, right? Like all we really hear of her is after we've heard Russ's basically going through his night, his alibi, and then she comes in a little bit and we hear her sort of trashing on him. And that's not that weird, right? Like that's this woman's friend who doesn't like her husband and thinks he murdered her.
Well, yeah. I mean, that doesn't like his husband. Like her husband happens quite a lot. The murdering aspect obviously is not. Well, you'd hope it doesn't happen that often.
On that note, though, I also think one of the things that I thought was, so I liked the way it's set up in this first episode. I did think it was a little bit strange. So not just that she isn't featured more, but I also thought Betsy, like, so the victim, wasn't really a center of the story, right? Like it was really both about Russ, so the husband, but also about the Dateline team. I thought that was a little strange where they kind of make a point of saying like, we're part of this story. Which,
God, that's not something I had considered, but yeah, you're so right.
Yeah, like so there's Keith Morrison, the host, but then there's also the producer, the Dateline producer, which is Kathy Singer. And I feel like we don't really get a whole lot about her, but we just are told that like they're going to become more of a factor later on.
Yeah. It's so interesting. Like it's not usually something that you'd hear in episode 1, do you know? But the one thing that like kind of we'll probably touch on a little bit later, it is kind of like reminds me a little bit of Serial in a way because it felt investigative as well as like telling the story. Like in Inside the Crime, when we did our full review on that, we both said like it was just telling a story and like it was a really good story and we really enjoyed listening to it, but there was no like investigative side of it, where Serial nearly went down the like full investigative route, which was you know, it was a different style of it, whereas this kind of seems to have like the balance of the two.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like I would compare it to, and this is maybe too far of a leap, but like a Sherlock Holmes type story where it's not just about the victim and the crime, but it's about the investigation. It's about how they got there,
Yeah. Yeah.
right? And in this case, it's not just about the police and how they get there, but about this Dateline team
Mm.
and how they get in touch with Russ's lawyer. That's one of the things that we get, and just how they sort of get pulled in.
Yeah, and even with the 911 call, like Kathy, the producer,
Yeah, the Dateline producer.
the Dateline producer, she brings up like a previous case and like having listened to other 911 calls, and there was one instance in particular where she was saying there was a couple, and the husband of the couple, his mum was staying with them, and someone in the middle of the evening came in and shot the son, and both his wife and his mother, who rang the police, rang 911, and they were both so calm. In fact, either the mother or the wife said someone has been shot, not my son, and they were completely calm during it. And so it was interesting that she even weighed in with that. Like she's kind of bringing herself and her experiences into the story, which it's not that I didn't dislike that. I actually quite enjoyed that. I thought that was very interesting, because one of the questions I had to pose to you was like, do you think you'd be able to tell if someone was genuine or not? Like in that like situation, like surely it's a near impossible when it comes to like raw emotion or stress, like such a highly stressful situation as that. You don't know. People react in such different ways. Some people shut down. Some people go into like, like really erratic mode. Like I'd definitely be the latter. I would not be shutting down at all. But like I don't know. I'm like, does anyone actually think they can tell if someone is faking it or not?
I don't. Yeah, I think it's really hard to tell. I mean, I have had to call 911 a few times, and I feel like there's sort of a disassociation that can happen where, like, the one story I'll share is the first time I called 911, which was when I was driving and I came across a deer that had been hit but was not dead on the side of the road. And I called 911 thinking that was the thing to do. It's not, by the way. You need to call animal control or take care of it yourself. This was also in Maine, where they would presume that you would be able to take care of it yourself, which I was not prepared to do. But I remember making that call and thinking, like, I don't know what emotion really to feel right now. And I'm like, as a result, I think I was probably pretty flat. And, but I was experiencing a lot of emotion. I think the emotions that I was feeling weren't coming out of my voice.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I listened to that call, and I have a lot of thoughts about them playing that 911 call, or just listening to 911 calls in general, right? Because that's a thing that you hear fairly often. And I always think this is a very upsetting and disturbing thing to hear, particularly when in this type of setting where, right, like if we are to believe what we are hearing, this man is in that moment where he just discovered his wife dead. And that is like the real recording that we're listening to. Like, is it appropriate for us to be listening into this moment of this man's life? And it's like watching a snuff film, right? Like, I feel like that's something that we just shouldn't do.
Good point.
But well, one other thing on that. At the same time, as I'm listening to it, I thought, yeah, he does kind of sound fake. He does kind of sound, but like, I don't know this guy. I don't know what he's going through. I don't know his day, right? Like, I don't know his relationship with his wife. I don't know anything
how much weed he smoked.
Well, we know some, not zero. Yeah.
Which I don't know. I don't know the impact that can have on your emotions, but like
some, right? Some.
Presumably.
So what do you think about that?
So interesting thing I actually never thought of, which is the playing of the 911 call. But yeah, as soon as you say it, I'm like, it feels so personal. Like, it feels like there should be like some sort of GDP where like you shouldn't play it unless, I don't know, he signs off that you can play it. Maybe he did. We aren't aware. I'm sure they would have disclaimed that if there was a legal situation like where you had to get his sign off. But it felt too raw to hear. And I'm like, yeah, as you said, like if he is actually looking, like finding and just staring at his wife's body with the slits in her arms as he sees it, because he doesn't really see anything else, then it's too much. Like it shouldn't, it shouldn't be played. But in terms of how genuine it was, like I feel like without enough context, anyone who is upset or displaying big emotions, if you don't know the story behind it, the full story, it's very easy to say someone's faking it or someone's not. Or if you don't know the personality. Like I think for like my best friends or like my parents or whatever, I'd be able to tell straight away if they're faking an emotion because I know them so well. Or my kids, which, kids.
Sure.
But for someone you don't know, and when you don't know what has happened right before it, how can you tell? Like, I don't know how Russ reacts to a bad joke, a crass joke, or, I don't know how he reacts when someone, annoys him a little bit. I don't know how he moves and how his voice quivers when he's annoyed or something. Like I know that about my husband. I don't know about this guy. And we don't have enough information for us to really be able to tell if his emotions are genuine or not.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the same thing follows through with the tape of the interrogation with the police. Right? Which is, I think that one of the next things we hear. And so it talks about how he was questioned for 2 days and how he was sort of in and out of like crying and yelling and shock. And to hear a bit of that and to sort of like, I just don't feel like we can judge his truthfulness. Like, I think it's certainly fascinating to hear.
Oh, definitely.
But I don't know. I don't feel like we can make value judgments on it.
No, I agree. But going back briefly to the 911 call, which is like, so fascinating, is the fact that he said like she killed herself. So we don't know like where he was standing and what he could actually see, like what side of her body she could see, but we know that he obviously saw these slits on her arms. We obviously don't think that he was able to see her neck, but that's what he's saying in it. And I just feel like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know. I was going to say like, why would he say that if he was the killer? But then obviously he's like, oh, I didn't see the other parts of it. But like, I think it's really believable that he wouldn't see the other parts of it. Like,
right. And so we learned that in this episode, right? That she was stabbed 56 times. But he couldn't tell that from what was visible, right? Like all that was clear was that she had slits in her arms and a knife in her neck, which is, I mean, that's gruesome. That's a lot. There's a fairly haunting image of what the interrogators tell him, where they say they were still counting.
I was just gonna say that. Like, what? Like, I understand. I don't. I kind of feel like I said this the last time. I'm like, I understand the heavy-handedness. I do not understand heavy-handed law enforcement officers. I understand being tactical with your words to try to evoke something out of someone. I do get that. But saying we're still counting, like if he's the killer, he knows how many times he stabbed her, or he knows it's a lot. If he's not, right, that's just torture.
Yeah. Yeah, it's brutal. It's really rough.
Really like unnecessary. I don't know that they really got anything out of that. Like, I think it's a bit harsh.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, we learn in this episode that, he had a reason to think she committed suicide, right? Like she had a history of suicide attempts. She also had stage 4 breast cancer.
Yeah. Oh my God.
Like they sort of allude to this, but I feel like so they had gone on this celebration of life cruise in Mexico earlier, I think that same year.
Yeah.
And now this is December 27th, so like sort of like the bleakest, darkest time of the year.
Mm.
And yeah, I feel like it's a logical dark point in her life. Like she knows she has terminal cancer and doesn't have very long to live. So, but I don't know that the police knew that at that point. I don't think they did. Or we don't know. I guess we don't know what
We
they
don't
knew.
know what they
Yeah.
knew or what they were even considering.
But we should talk a little bit about what we do get from Pam in this one, right? Like I think it's interesting. Like she basically kind of swoops in after all this, like all this emotion and darkness and all this stuff about Russ and Betsy. And then she starts talking about how horrible their relationship is and this pillow over the face game.
What was that?
Yeah.
Like-
Okay. So do you want to explain it?
So basically what Pam mentions is, Russ could sometimes be teasing her. I think she used the word teasing. And like, none of this is teasing when it's like, oh, if you do that again, I might like end up burying you in the backyard kind of stuff. Like, that's not teasing. Well, that's not how I tease anyone. But anyway, apparently there was this story that Russ put a pillow over Betsy's face and said, this is just so you know how it feels, if I was ever going to kill you. Like, what? Like,
Yeah.
what? Like, first of all, I wonder, is the story in any way true? The other option is that maybe the story was true, but really like it was retold in a bizarre way where it's kind of without the killing you, but like he put a pillow over my face because that's what I'm into. I don't know. Like it was, I don't know. It just seems so bizarre.
It's very bizarre, and it gets into this sort of like he said, she said thing, right? Because if Betsy said this to Pam, then the only two people alive who theoretically know about this are Pam and Russ. Russ says that never happened. Pam says it did. What do you do with that? Like, it's, I don't know.
And that kind of feeds into like what, like the lazy police thing that's going on again, where it's like, obviously, look, I know from listening to so much true crime that like the chances are that it's the husband or the partner or someone close, really close to the victim, like is really high. But it's like they just took this as like, well, that makes sense. It must have been Russ. Like, and just go forward with it.
Yeah, but also, I mean, we hear about Russ's night. We hear his alibi, right?
So many people.
It's documented in so many ways. He runs some errands. So he has receipts. There's cell phone, like tower data. There's security camera footage. He goes to his friend's house. There's 3 friends there.
Loads of receipts, phone tower.
Yeah, they watch the new Conan movie, and then they start watching The Road, and then they don't like The Road.
Sorry, I love the tidbit that it was really boring. And then Keith Morrison is like, is the name Keith Morrison? Yeah.
Yeah.
Keith Morrison is like, The Road, Cormac McCarthy. Apparently it was boring. Like something like you can't judge everyone for their tastes or something like that. I was like, this is such a random, like funny aside on the production part.
That jumped out at me because I've never seen the movie, but I did read the book. Did you read the book or see the movie?
I did neither. Paul did both. And he described it to me and said, I don't think it's really for you. And I was like, yeah. I might have been pregnant at the time, so it might have been like a...
As a parent, I mean, the story, if you don't know it, is about a dad and his son in a post-apocalyptic world, basically trying to survive, and things go terribly. It's very bleak, very sad.
But boring? It feels like it wouldn't be boring. I don't know.
I don't think I mean I didn't find the book boring. I just found it incredibly dark and depressing.
Mm.
Well written though. It's a great book, but I never want to read it again. Anyway, but so that's part of his alibi. He goes to Arby's, which no comment on the Arby's from Keith, but I don't know. I presume he got the curly fries because those are great. I'll
I
stand
don't
by
know.
those.
I've never stood in an Arby's before.
Oh, well, if you do go, get the
Curly
curly
fries
fries.
are like the opposite of my thing. Like they're just not. Like they're so far from being my thing.
Well, you're missing out. They're great.
Mm.
Anyway, but yeah, so he has this alibi, but still, it seems like the police just believe Pam and not Russ, right? Like I get that it's often the husband. Most often times the husband is the one who did it, but there's this other person there who seems suspicious, who was the last person to see her alive. I don't know.
It's so I'm going to go back to what I said kind of towards the start, which is like the thing about Pam being the name. I don't know whether my thoughts and opinions and feelings towards Pam are impacted by that. I'm sure they are. But I just couldn't get over she's upset and then she goes in and she starts talking to the police and then she starts spewing all this detail about like I don't know, the cry at the start was odd and then I don't know. It was just weird. I was like, what's there was no emotion nearly behind her telling of it. It was like she was telling a story and nearly like she was enjoying the creation of a story. Like
yeah,
it was
that's a
like
good way to put it.
so if I was in a situation I can only imagine that if a friend of mine who I knew was not in a solid, good, healthy relationship was murdered, that I would go in being like, it was him, like it has to be him, like listen to all of these things he's done, like I have X, Y and Z to prove it, like talk to anyone, like they had a toxic relationship. Like I wouldn't be going in, I don't know. And again, I know that goes back to what we were saying about the raw emotion and how you would deal with it, but like it just felt like she was enjoying it too much.
Yeah. So, all right. Should I ask you a question I think I know the answer to? How eager are you to keep listening to the show?
Oh, I was in. I'm in. I nearly was in from seeing the title and then hearing the first 5-10 minutes and being like, where? I'm trying not to go down the who the fuck is Alice route, but like, where the fuck is Pam? Because she's not in the story. That this must be really interesting because it looks like an open and shut case. But like, where is Pam? And because you don't hear about her that much, but she's like the title, I'm like, I was in from that, definitely.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. I think, I think we've kind of covered this, but I feel like in terms of it comparing to anything else, I actually think it does have some similarities to Inside the Crime in terms of the sort of professional narration, right? Like I think like I feel like I'm in sort of like good hands in terms of like a polished storyteller.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point.
Some of that is the voice, just the voice alone, but I think it also has a similar kind of feel in terms of the production, the music, the pacing. I also like that it's similar to Inside the Crime. Like by the time the episode is over, I thought, oh really, already? Like we're already at the end of this first episode. I could have kept going with this. So I'm definitely eager to keep going with this. I think this is one that's definitely worth the time.
Yeah, and it seems like they're packing a lot into the episode without it feeling overwhelming. Like other than the fact that we discussed how Keith Morrison's voice can kind of lull you into like a trance and you have to go back and listen. Like there was no point really where I was like, oh, they said too much and I wasn't able to keep up. And then as well with Inside the Crime, in terms of like just episode 1 and seeing this lazy police work, I'm like, is this always the case? Like, come on, lads, do your job. So yeah, I thought that was kind of similar, but definitely slightly different in terms of the fact that it seems slightly more investigative, which I think I mentioned earlier. Definitely recommend. I think everyone should listen along with us, and we will look forward to doing the full recap.
I can't wait to talk more about this one.
Oh,
this is going to be fun.
I know, it really is.
All right, let's go on to the question of the episode. So, all right. So, this is a sort of related question in that we're going to talk about something that happened also in Missouri. So, I was just reading about this case about Timothy Stevenson, who was living a quiet married life with his husband and twin daughters in the San Francisco Bay Area, but back in Missouri in what about a couple decades ago,
98,
he
was it?
yeah, that sounds right. 1998. He murdered somebody at his home, covered it up, stashed the body. The body did get found, but he never got connected to it. And then about 10 years after that happened, he married his husband. They started their life with their daughters. At some point, he told his husband that he committed this murder. And then after a while, the marriage began to dissolve. And the husband basically told the police, "Hey, this guy committed this murder, and now it's caught up to him, and he's facing punishment for that." So that leads to this question, which is, D, if your spouse told you they murdered someone, are you going to keep it a secret?
So I've thought long and hard about this question, and what's really what's really got me is, do I believe in my core that my husband can tell me anything in the world, like he can trust me with anything in the world? Absolutely. We are very open and honest. We share everything together. But the other side of that is, I can't keep anything to myself. Like, if someone tells me a very serious secret, I can obviously keep that to myself, usually. But in this case, I just feel like, I don't know, I'd be like, oh my goodness, guess what's happening? But no, to not make light of the fact of, like, I know you're relating it to the case of Timothy Stevenson. I can totally understand why a spouse would be caught between, like, you know, being loyal to their partner, but also like having to tell the truth. I get eaten up by emotion. I overthink. It would actually break me entirely. I'd be stressed out to the nines, worrying that at any stage things would get caught up. I couldn't imagine being able to sit on that. I don't think I would tell someone else, but I would be urging my spouse, I think, to tell someone else.
I mean, it sounds like you wouldn't be able to contain it, and you
I
would
wouldn't be
eventually
able to
break down
contain
and
it.
tell someone.
Yeah. Like, eventually it's like a real stretch as well. It doesn't
Like,
take me very long to break down about someone and say it to someone else. Yeah.
would you be texting someone as you were being told?
No, not by my spouse. I mean, if I heard a friend of a friend of a friend had done something, where, oh my God, guess what happened? But not my spouse. What about you?
I don't know. I hadn't really. Okay. I mean, I read this story, and I feel like an important element of this story is that it sounds like this guy used it as a threat, right? Like it was.
Oh, sorry. Just to be clear, Timothy Stevenson used it as a threat over his husband.
We're not talking about your husband and what.
No, I mean, like,
with.
you did.
No.
I don't think you made it clear, like, who used it a threat over who. Like, did his
Right.
husband use it as a threat over him, or him over his husband? That's what I'm
No,
saying.
the one who did the murdering
Yeah.
used it as a threat, which I guess I feel like context matters here. So the question is broad, but does it matter when it happened, who they murdered, like what the situation was, right? Like, was it a self-defense situation that got covered up, or was it a, like what we are led to believe happened with Russ Faria, that it was some sort of like crime of passion that had been building for a while. Like, I feel like that matters a little bit. Like, I think, is this a moment where, yes, this person theoretically can tell you anything and you have this deep trust, but then you discover something about them that you didn't know. And
like that profoundly changes the nature of your relationship, right? Because they theoretically have been carrying this. Like if it just happened, that's also different, right? Like, why are they murdering someone right now? But if they're telling you about something that happened 25 years ago, that also means they kept that secret from you for that long.
So it's the trust element that comes into it as well, as opposed to like what else are you hiding from me if you're hiding a murder?
Yeah. Yeah. That's a pretty big thing, right? The biggest maybe of things. Like I think too about that serial killer on Long Island, the guy who murdered all the women and buried them on the beach, and he just got caught last year.
Oh yeah.
And he was living at home with his wife, and I mean his children were, I think, adult age, but did they not know? Like presumably they didn't know. Like how would you, like I feel like oftentimes we hear about serial killers and they live alone, or like they're loners. This guy had a wife and kids and like a day job, and maybe none of them knew. But yeah, if you know your husband is a serial killer, how do you keep that to yourself?
I do think serial killer is very different to they murdered someone.
Well, that's why context matters, right? Like
That's true.
I want to know. I kind of want to know the when and where and the why.
But would you keep it to yourself? That's the question.
I don't know. It's a really hard question. I don't know. This is a very tough question. And
there's a lot of layers to it.
Yeah. I mean, I presume at this moment we're not admitting on this podcast that either of our spouses have committed murder.
No, I'm going to admit the exact opposite. That they have never.
To your knowledge, so far.
I'd know.
That's
I'm an
maybe
investigator. That's my side job, my side gig.
That's another version of this question. Would you know?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I can tell a lie. I can tell when he's lying a mile away. As a Christmas present to you all, we're going to do something a little bit different in our next episode. Jeff and I, a little while back, chose one of our non-true crime podcast favorites, and we made the other person listen to an episode of it. And then we came on to discuss and judge each other. And yeah, it's a break from crime. But don't worry, we'll have more discussions on true crime podcasts next year.
So Much Crime, So Little Time is a production of Mind Glove Media. The executive producer is Paxton Caloriso. Our associate producer is Blythe Ty. Our theme music was composed by Vyacheslav Starostin. If you haven't done it yet, please subscribe to this show on your podcast app. And don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and a review. Even better, tell your friends. To join the discussion, look for us on social media. Check out the show notes for all the links. Thanks for listening.